Hello there everybody and welcome to a reworked build of mine. We are revisiting our critical hit build for the Barbarians. This one is hitting way harder, is relying way less on animals, and well, I find it much more successful than the old predecessor, because the old build was kind of like overcapping into crit and I didn't like that. So let's talk business. First up, we are working with overwhelm tactics because that's still the cheapest way of gaining a baseline critical hit chance you can work with. I picked light-footed because I love it for frontline heavy builds. It's pretty nifty if you can reposition and will. It could be replaced with something else, like giving your troops more damage, more resilience. Pick what you like. I personally like this one, as mobility is a stat that's hard to measure in numbers, but it really comes, for me, very, very handy. And of course, the ever-prevalent adaptable. Here, though, I would argue that Hardy would be a pretty good pick too, because we're working with low-tier troops too. Alright, cultural traits-wise, I went with runesmiths. You have not that much mana on your bank, and the mana you have you will want to spend for all manner of different things. To make matters worse, your unit enchantments are really important for your culture, therefore, well, I usually am not so clingy on this trait anymore than I was in the past, but for these guys it's a real godsend, especially since research is not our strongest suit. Fabled Hunters is our early game steroid. Not only does it give us access to a tier 2 ranged unit, which is really powerful in our scenario, the Furies are pretty good, it also amps up the rewards that we get from infestations and wonders and resource nodes. This is such a power tool to get a good hefty start early on, and the Barbarians are really excelling at getting all these hefty early boost that they can get. It also brings us extra ranks on ranged and skirmisher units, which are used all over the board, so it's a pretty nifty one. I really like this combo. Let me know if you want to, if you know something you deem more useful. I'd be very interested. So, tome-wise, I started out with Zeal, as Zeal is very, very multifunctional. It boosts up the damage of pretty much all of our parts that we want to use for the damage's sake. It does not boost up battle mages and supporters, which we use really only for the utility side. Supporters, battle mages not at all. Inspiring Chant is boostering up the morale, more crits, and baseline damage for zealous troops, since pretty much everything you want to boost with that is already zealous profit. Also, mind you that Zeal, the damage bonus of that is increased against condemned units. That's where the Zealot comes into play. He's easy to summon, and he inflicts condemnation. And you don't have to worry if he dies. That's the best part about it. Condemnation is a single target spell which you can then use to amp up the damage on somebody. It's also pretty nifty because it debuffs the status resistance, which is useful for your tier 1 shields, which can stun. I like that. Fanatical Workforce, yeah, it's pretty powerful for us, because we have a really solid food income with the build that we rock, and this makes cities more productive. It's pretty nifty, especially since it runs out after a while. You don't have to worry about turning it off when it's time for it. Circle of Zealotry, yeah, well, it is useful if you want to print tons of troops. End of the line. The other tier 1 tome I pick up for this build is Tome of the Horde. We picked this up mainly for Spawnkin. 20% more for all of our roster. Hell yeah. It's really nifty, as it also boosts up the evasive qualities of our heroes. The Houndmasters are, well, interesting for this build. The thing is, they have a really heavy-hitting single shot. Although I think the overall damage of the Furies is higher, these guys come with a built-in Warhound spawn. That is another throwaway unit. And they are really fast. On the downside, they're squishy as paper. Their HP are ridiculously low, as they come with a secondary unit. Fury of the Horde, well, yeah, if you have a lot of tier 1s, cool. But, well, I don't use that spell too much for this build, honestly. Warhounds, really nifty for city sieges, but, well, I didn't use it too much for this build. Blaze of the Horde, amazing, as it really can do a good job in finishing off people. There's a lot of damage potential in that one. Summon Irregulars is together with Spawnkin the real other superhero here. Being able to refill your troops on the fly with the zealots and cheap tier 1s is invaluable at all stages of the game. We're going to make good use of that skill over the course of the game. I'll talk about that later. And because of that, Battle Seeker training is pretty nice. Tier 1s are valuable for us, and therefore this is a good upgrade. And the mob camp is a food building that makes your unit recruitment cheaper. That's pretty cool too. Alright, tier 2 comes and we go for the usual suspects, Revelry into Artificing, as this is pretty much, I don't know any better combo if you want to hit and if you want to crit hard and often. Now, Revelry gives us Blood Fury weapons, which is a good power up for our frontliners, more damage, more morale strengthening, good stuff. Revel is hard, more morale from everything we killed, and Scalds, which give us point-blank AoE support skills and a ranged attack that can turn insane. Scalds are your frontline supporters, whereas your cultural supporters are more the backliners. But more about that later. Revels of Carnage is something I rarely use as Revels of Blood. The three most interesting things here are Blood Fury Weapons, Scalds, and Revel's Hearts, and the Revel's Triumph. See, we are building a critical hit build, and Revel's Triumph is just a wet dream in increasing your damage substantially. So don't sleep on that. Pick it up for all of your heroes. Carnival of Flesh, what can I say? It's even more food and draft. This is later for our Eldritch Ruler. Really useful. If you don't rock an Eldritch Ruler, don't you worry at all. The increase of food and draft gives you the ability to have stupidly huge cities and a massive output of units, which you can use to whittle down the enemy. There's nothing wrong with that either. Tome of Artificing is where we head up next for the sweet artisan armaments, which is just more of the same. It's straightforward, but at this point your units are already at a sweet high 50% critical hit base chance if they're standing next to somebody. That is really good already. Siege magic for your supporters. Their main thing here is a smidge more damage and siege breaker, which makes them more useful in sieges. But yeah, I use it, I recommend it, but it's a slight increase. But it makes your supporters ever more useful. The Iron Golem is where I am heading next, as they don't get your cultural bonuses. But if you need a stronger frontline against a certain type of enemy, these guys come to serve. The problem with them is that they are not too resilient against magical damage, so there stays a weakness on that end. Golem assistants for your heroes are amazing, more bodies to throw at the enemies are always good, and the Golem Mine gives you the ability to build a mine, which is, with our slight materium focus, pretty nice, as mines yield then gold and mana. Tier 3 comes, and Devastation. So Devastation is amazing for this build. The Flame Burst weapons add-on brings us now to a sweet spot of 70% critical hit chance flat, and then the morale bonuses apply, and that is all we want. Also, it makes people explode when we last hit them with our melee units, which gives us all the incentive to do so. Focus of Devastation makes your supporters real good utility things that you will really love, as they can now smack people out of their defense modes from afar. You have already a lot of shock units that do the same, but yeah, well, what can I say? The supporters in your army are sort of a necessary evil, but at least they get buffed, you know? Monstrous Rebirth is a superstar in this build. This is where we get the full-blown benefit out of the tier 1s that we're carrying around. We are allowed to transform them into a tier 4 shock trooper when we want to. Isn't that nifty? So that's really stupidly powerful. I love that spell, especially in synergy with the Horde Tome and the Zeal Tome. We always have bodies to use for this spell. And of course we can recruit the Warp Reeds more permanently in our cities as well, but mind you, Town Hall tier 4, pretty high baseline cost. Devastator Spheres, lovely. Lots of fortification damage and a nice explosion. I like these. So the other tier 3 I pick up for this build, for the sake of stability, cycles. You see, you're getting really far with this build with the low amount of support that you got, but there are limits. Cycles comes to give you the stabilization that you need for the mid and late game, because otherwise your build will not work out anymore, admittedly. So if you are really under pressure already, you could rush that also as your first tome in the tier 3 sector. Why so? Projectiles of Decay is a massive upgrade for your backline. Finally, your supporters are also getting some more to do than just debuffing people with random stuff, and it also applies to all of your other ranged people. Powerful. But parting gifts is another little thing. Whenever a friendly unit dies, we heal. You see, this brings our sacrificial tactics to a completely new level of bonkers. So now you can utilize rebirths as Warborn as a healing as well. I like that. Mind you though, it is pretty costly. The combat enchantments need to be prepared first, and there's a lot of mana involved, so this is what you're going to use for the big battles, but it is so worth it. Diffuse Health though is the small brother of parting gifts, as it damages one person, and in a 2-hex radius you get a burst heal. Amazing stuff. These are the tools that your build really needed to sustain into the later stages of the game, from my humble experiences, that is. And the Druid of the Cycle is really cool, as he has pretty nifty damage. He can sacrifice also stuff, and he can rebirth stuff. So yeah, what can I say? There's really a lot of synergy with this build, and I like it. This is probably the first build where I feel like the Cycles Tome is getting used to its full extent, and I'm very happy about that, because usually I only recommend that on a side note. After that, you should straight up head into Chaos Channeling, where your build is being finished. Chaos Channeling is really good. Your ranged units gain now Infernal Might. This is really nice, because in the past, this was also just adding more strengthened stacks, which made it borderline useless for your Furies, which also get these by default. Here we now get Infernal Might when we're attacking, and morale, more crits, more fire damage. Yeah, it's lovely. And it's applied to pretty much all of your backline. That's the best part about it. Golden Horde gives you a freaking full-on army out of your mana. What's not to love about that? And Scion of Flame. Well, the Vengeful Flames is dope, as it really racks up over the course of a battle. Every strike they take is hurting them, and you're immune against burning. That's pretty nice too. So what's left to say? Yeah, fan the Inferno. Burn. Make everybody burn. Why not? And Sacrificial Slaughter, well, here we have a similar scheme. We have so many tools to kill our own units to get some profit out of that. So that's really nifty. And that after that, it's up to you where you want to go for the tomb that you pick. Before the Chaos Lord one, Chaos Lord is good for Demonic Onslaught, but that's pretty much it. Sadly that. If I want to recommend one on the side, it's Doom Herald, as there is a stupidly good synergy with that build. It was just that Artificing and the Revelry Tome were just stronger synergy-wise together than the Doom Herald one. But this one would be very powerful in your build as well, as it gives you something of everything you would love. Except for the Banshees, they suck for your build. But the Doom Depth Trenches would be at least a knowledge tool. Anyways, let's talk strategy. So, for this build, your roster of Sunderers and Warriors is something you'll use a lot. Sunderers are amazing. Not only do they get to ranged attack every single frickin' turn, they also debuff the enemy's defenses when they do so. That's pretty cool, that makes them very good ranged units on a budget, and you know, you see here what we got. This build is not in its final form, and this is the baseline damage, mind you. There is still a critical hit chance on top of that. So these guys can hit like a truck from afar, and their melee ain't bad either. They just melt like ice in the sunshine. There's Warriors. Their shield bash proves invaluable, especially like I said earlier in the combination of Condemnation. Condemnation lowers the enemy's status resistance, which makes it really easy to stun even high tier units. I love this combination. Zeal and Barbarians just works darn well. So these guys also are made to die on the front line. They melt against magic units, and you see there is sort of a weakness on this build. I can't deny there's always sort of a weakness, but luckily we got tools to deal with these weaknesses. So Furies are your typical backline archers that get frenzy when they attack. Their real power lies when they start lies in the point where they start critting. Before that, they are average, but not bad at all. They just take a turn or two to run to get into motion. The Houndmasters, well, if you need a lot of bodies on the field, they're good. But if not, pick up the Furies instead. I'd even go as far as saying as these are even almost borderline skippable units, as your Furies just do a much better job than them. The good thing about them is their Warhound, which is really, really nice, but apart from that, they just die way too fast, and we are not heavy enough on support to afford that. So you see the baseline Fury already comes with 10 HP more than the Houndmaster, and without the weakness of being a cavalry unit, you know, polearms and such. Anyways, War Shamans, the backbone of your supporting army. The Invigorate skill is amazing. It is annoying that it has such a high cooldown, and it is a full action, and I personally think this is where the skill could use a buff. It feels a little bit weaker than other cultural supporters, but anyways, it does do the job very, very nicely as it comes with a range. My typical approach is just to move the units where they can get healed instead of moving the War Shaman, and everything is working on fine. These guys are really important. 3 to 4 of these are necessary to patch up your people wherever needed. What I personally love about Invigorate is that it also amps up the damage at the same time, and regeneration is a nice effect to have. So, tier 3 comes, and so do the Berserkers. These guys are important for your build, extremely so. Their Berserker's Rage allows them to go steadfast if they are ought to die. So these guys are so important because these guys are ought to go where the enemy's magic damage dealers are and shut them down. This is really an important job of theirs, as they are, well, if played well, hard to kill. Really, really hard to kill. Major downside, they're slow. Unlike other shock troopers on the tier 3 side, they don't get any mounts, so you will have to work a little bit to get them into position. But the Sunderers are also doing a darn well job at dealing with magic damage dealers, as they are fast. They can just get into the backline, and you don't worry about them dying at all. Iron Golems are your more sturdy frontliners if you ever need them. Their big mainstay is that they are constructs, and therefore they are immune against control loss, so they can't be berserk dominated or such, and this makes them really good because your frontline has a severe weakness on that end. Your warriors are good at holding the blows and everything, but yeah, they can't really get turned around easily and such, and they're still tier 1 units. Iron Golems fit that spot, and Skulls are featuring a point-blank AoE spell that amps up critical hit chance, yet again, and another one that gives morale and regeneration. So these guys are absolute buff monsters when it comes down to boosting up your critical hit and some sustain. Mainstay when you are running the Eldritch Ruler is a combination of enthralling your population and running the Dark Knowledge Ritual. Very, very, very important at that end, because your knowledge production will benefit a lot from that. You have an easy time to maintain a high amount of population with this build, as you have several upgrading buildings that, or province upgraders, as you see here, 3 at this point alone, that yield extra food. So it becomes really, really freaking easy to have a city that you can regularly milk for thralls without any severe repercussions. On the battlefield, you will work with losses, as you will rarely be able to fully avoid losing somebody. And it doesn't matter, as we have always available Summon Zealot and Summon Irregulars, which I haven't run here because I didn't need to, but it is also there for you. And this brings us up to another point, and you could utilize the summoning trait here pretty well. You know, the one that gives you 50% less summoning costs, just as a side note. Altogether, if you don't want to, or you cannot summon the troops because your mana is low, utilize your freaking high troop production rate from the Barbarian culture. You have a built-in production of draft in every one of your knowledge buildings, and since you want to run all of these knowledge buildings, your draft income will automatically be pretty high, so it'll be super easy to have a constant flow of reinforcements coming from the mainland. This brings us to the next point. We are relatively hungry in mana and gold, so helpful for this end I found to go for battlefield looting, because that's a really nifty one, and Lure of the Horde. So every victory gives us troops, or potentially troops. I found that extremely powerful. Also, we have a good opportunity to get into Materium and Nature, so our expansionistic plans are well, and to add some icing on the cake, our baseline order affinity gives us a early access to a Whispering Stone, which is something I really like. I also want to mention that if you can get via signature skills or heroes some extra shadow affinity, this helps out this build so much, as knowledge extraction alone is already worth it in itself to have some shadow affinity. All-seeing, and if you even get to the Court of Whispers upgrade, are massively helping your build. Your strategy is very straightforward. You just want to rack up as many troops as you can and wreak havoc with them as much as you can. This build is excellent at conquering stuff. On the battlefield, your strategy is very simple. This build works because it hits way harder than the enemy will do. Yes, you will be not having the same staying power as your enemy, but you will be able to blow up your enemy much faster than they do, and that is your hidden superpower. You can also use Song of the Reckless to go for some surprise damage actions, and Vision of Victory for some surprise critical hit boosts. Also, spam the hell out of that inspiring chant. You will have a lot of mana spending going on, so your cities should always look for as many mana nodes, knowledge nodes, and these things, even way more than other cultures. I point this out so strongly because you are playing barbarians. Your scouts are allowed to build outposts, which can build a worker camp and claim provinces. Yes, you need to hold them and all, but this is something that you need to utilize. If you get the opportunity to do so, you can really get an edge out of that. So what's left to say? It's amazing to see triple-digit critical hits coming out of your tier 3 shock troopers. And the real special thing about this build is that it scales so darn well. You gain the Warbreed as a tier 4 unit. If you wanted to, you could also take a side turn into, where are you, Order Tomes? Here. Into Cleansing Flame, which isn't too much of an insane synergy in itself, but the Pyre Templars, with the critical hit profile that we got, are top-notch units. So this build excels at having a very strong early, a very strong mid-game, and a very strong late-game, because you get all the tier 4 units that synergize with everything you do, and yeah, enjoy the fat crits. The only thing that you really need to take care of and be wary of is taking too much damage in the first blow. You are all about the Alpha Strike. your job is always to hurt the enemy more than he hurts you, and then you win every fight pretty easily. You will lose troops by doing so, and you should always try to focus that on summoned troops, on tier 1 troops that you can easily replace and all, or use signature summons from your heroes. Whatever you do, this is very important. And the other thing is, your heroes can utilize very, very well signature spells and skills for healing. That is something that boosts up this build like crazy. Any instance of mass rejuvenation, restoration, and these things is a real godsend and sends you over the edge even harder. In this run, I haven't had any of these. I only had restore and a couple of summons, and it worked a charm. Really. It's massive. It's much better than the old version, as it's much less finicky, and it's still hitting hard as a truck and scales super well. It's just very economy hungry and doesn't have the tools to build up the economy very well. So yeah, you need the conquering. You need the money from the conquering constantly to keep this economy going, which is the only real downside that I found so far. But who cares if you are able to hit their faces all day long and get away with it. So enjoy the build. I hope you do. Have a nice day. Leave me in the comments. Let me know what you want to see next and leave a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. Check out the description box. And feel free to support the channel directly via the links you find down there. Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, channel membership, whatever pleases you, pleases me as well. With a big thanks to all of you who support the channel, and a big thanks to you for watching this video. So, see you all on the next one, and have a good time.